Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a disturbing nature.
And we're not going to hold back on the graphic details and disturbing content.
So we do not recommend our podcast for children under the age of 13.
And while we respect the victims and their families involved in these tragic cases,
we're also going to be critical of mistakes that are made during the investigations.
And we're going to use dark humor to express ourselves now and then.
So with that said, this podcast may not be for everyone.
And that's okay. We're glad you're here checking us out.
And if you've made it this far, welcome to the Unsung Murder Ballads family. And follow us on Instagram at Unsung Murder Ballads if you want to talk to us.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Unsung Murder Ballads. This is episode 129. I am Janus Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
All right, so tonight we have a kind of a fun episode, quote-unquote fun episode.
Oh boy.
It's not as heavy, it's not as emotionally draining as many of the other episodes we do, because we like to occasionally go back in time and do a period piece, and that's what today's all about.
A period piece, perfect time of the month for me.
How so? I totally...
Sorry, we talk about death and murder. Can I not make a period joke on this podcast?
I totally didn't get it. That's the sad part of that. I was sitting here like...
it was on my delivery.
I was like, what are you talking about? No, that was my...
Well, to our female listeners, if you're out there,
yes.
you get it, you get it.
That was really funny because it was so subtle. And maybe it wasn't subtle. It just went right over my head. I was like, what are you talking about? Is this...
Listeners, comment. Let us know if you got the joke.
I was sitting here like, what month is it? You have Black History Month and, Cancer Awareness Month. I was like, what are you talking about?
It's History Awareness Month. We're learning about history.
Well, all right. Let's just dive into this, shall we?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. It's the early evening on April 13th, 1933. 22-year-old Bonnie Parker sat on a mattress copying her poetry. She and her boyfriend had been renting that apartment for about 2 weeks, and it was about time for them to hit the road again. Now, her boyfriend's brother was in the garage downstairs. He's preparing the car, and his wife, Blanche, is packing up for their departure. Bonnie had heard a car pull into the driveway, and she was hopeful that it was her boyfriend, Clyde Barrow, returning.
Oh, Bonnie and Clyde, is that so?
That's what we're doing, yep.
Okay, let's go.
So she anxiously listened, but instead of hearing him enter, there were other sounds. A shout, and then the distinctive noise of a shotgun being racked, followed by another. Bonnie quickly jumped to her feet. Bonnie quickly jumped to her feet and sprinted to the window, and one glance told her everything she needed to know. A police car had pulled up, and another one was blocking their driveway. She quickly grabbed a nearby gun that was propped up against the wall. She threw open the window, and she took aim.
Oh boy.
All it took was a squeeze of the trigger, and she unleashed a hail of bullets into the street. She watched...
It was a shotgun?
No, this was a nearby machine gun. She heard the shotgun outside.
Okay. I was going to say, I'm not a gun expert, but okay, I'm with it now.
Yes, it's a machine gun. So the police dove behind trees, and she kept her finger depressed as she shredded the bark of the trees with bullets.
Oof.
From the garage, more shots blasted the police car, and Clyde's brother's wife, Blanche, raced up the stairs. Bonnie grabbed a spare magazine and was reloading, and she looked out to see Clyde dragging a dead police officer, and his brother Buck was pushing the police car out of the way so that they could exit onto the street. And then they ran back inside.
Whoa.
They all knew that reinforcements couldn't be far behind, so the four jumped in the car, and with a screech of tires, the gang was gone. When the police later searched that apartment, they found a staggering number of weapons, military rifles, and machine guns.
And they left them behind?
I was going to say they didn't take any of that with them?
They had to get the fuck out. Anything that wasn't already packed and ready, they had to leave behind. Unfortunately for them, that included some of their clothing and personal belongings, which included Bonnie's poetry notebooks, her camera, and rolls of undeveloped film. With that, police took a real interest in.
I'm sure that helped a lot.
Yes. Well, the next morning, those poems and photographs would be on the front pages of almost every newspaper in the United States.
Wow.
In this one moment, a small-time gang was propelled into notoriety as people got their first look at the most infamous couple in the U.S. history, and that is, as you rightly guessed, Bonnie and Clyde.
Damn, I am excited to learn this story.
This is an awesome story. I'm not going to lie. This is similar to like the Hatfields and the McCoys. Like, this is such a great moment in history. And this couple, I think, personified this time period very well.
I mean, they certainly are iconic.
Yeah, because everybody knows the phrase. It's like Romeo and Juliet and Bonnie and Clyde. You know,
exactly.
You may not know the story, but you know they're like two criminals that were a couple. And it goes so much deeper than that.
Right. I know they're two criminals, and I'm pretty sure they've died together. That's the other thing I know.
And they did, yes. So, but we will obviously get to that part.
Right. And I don't think that's a spoiler. I feel like most people know that.
I would say
sorry if that was a spoiler.
Yeah, if that was a spoiler, well, complain to us in the comments.
If you get spoiled, if you get spoiled by Joyous, then you know you're out of the loop.
That's really funny. Yes. All right. So before we jump fully into this story, a quick historical context about the U.S. at this time. So the era that Bonnie and Clyde grew up in was a tumultuous one. Prohibition, which outlawed the manufacture and sale of alcohol, had been in effect since 1920. It fueled the rise of organized crime, and it essentially created a rift between the government and law enforcement and large sections of the population. Everyday Americans became more cynical of authority. Widespread drought had forced families in the rural Midwest off of their farms and into the cities. Shanty towns and traveler camps, many of them home to thousands, were everywhere. Then, in 1929, the Great Depression slammed the brakes on what was left of the Roaring '20s. Banks closed, businesses went under, and rural towns, some of them just died out entirely.
Bro, sometimes I forget that those were at the same time, and like, dude, it was the Great Depression, and you couldn't even drink your feelings away.
Exactly. That's tough. That sucks.
That's tough.
You were just putting more money in the pockets of what would become organized crime.
Tough.
Yeah.
Trade one for another, I guess.
Right, and I'm going to throw this out there. Anyone who hasn't seen it, watch the HBO TV series Boardwalk Empire that really focused on prohibition, and it's a fantastic show. I loved it. Steve Buscemi is brilliant in it, and it's mostly based on historical information.
Ooh, I love me some historical fiction. I'm into it.
Yeah, it's really good. I'll make sure I send you a link after. Okay, so a quarter of the population at this point in the U.S. were out of work. Bread lines grew and soup kitchens were overflowing. Resentment of government, law, and banks were widespread. And among the poor and working class in particular, there was this mood of utter helplessness and anger. Now, this was almost 100 years ago, but in a lot of ways we could be talking about today.
I was going to say the same thing, yeah.
Crazy that it looped back about 100 years later.
Some things are always true.
Mm-hmm. So this particular story starts in the small town of Tellico, Texas. Clyde Chestnut Barrow was the fifth of 7 children, born into a poor farming family in 1909. In the early 1920s, when Clyde was still a boy, the Barrow farm failed, and the family moved to the city of Dallas in abject poverty. At first, they were living under a bridge that spanned the Trinity River.
Woof.
It was almost as if every homeless person in that city was living there. It was like an entire neighborhoods. And it was essentially a homeless camp.
Mm-hmm.
The Barrows literally lived in the mud beneath a wagon. But after months...
Oh, God.
Yeah, months.
Oh.
And after months of this, they finally were able to upgrade to a tent. That's how bad it was then.
So fucking awful.
So eventually, Clyde's father, Henry, saved enough money to buy a nearby gas station, and the large family moved into a single room in the back of that gas station, which I guess is an upgrade from a tent.
Well, 100% an upgrade. It's a room.
Right, exactly. So Clyde was a small, good-looking kid that dreamed of becoming a musician and somehow, despite his poverty, even learned to play guitar and saxophone.
Wow.
However, he did drop out of school to follow his older brother Buck into petty crime. The rumor
At that point, it makes sense. He probably had no chance at a career. Petty crime was his best career.
Let's be honest. I think that was how a lot of people probably felt at that time, especially the young.
Oh, 100%. And I wouldn't necessarily tell them they're wrong.
No, exactly. In that situation, I would have done anything I could.
Absolutely.
So the rumor about Clyde's first brush with illegal activity is that he helped his brother, who was obsessed with cockfighting, steal a rooster from a neighboring farm because they had no birds of their own to take to these cockfights.
Oh my God.
So,
how is that a flex? How is that like oh my God, I stole a rooster.
Well, I mean, but this is the rumor of what his first official crime was, stealing a rooster.
Hilarious.
I mean, if you play with the words a little bit, like, what are you in for? Stealing a cock? You know, like,
don't you hate it when that happens, man? They catch you stealing a cock.
Makes me think of that song, Detachable Penis.
What song is that?
You've never heard that? It's by a band called King Missile, I think. It's
No, but that's great. I'm adding that to my playlist.
Yeah, it's funny is what it is. It's not a great song, but it was funny.
It sounds perfect for a drag number.
And there you go.
Detachable Penis. There we go. King
oh my
Missile.
God, that is a beautiful one. Yeah, you're right. For a drag show, that's a good one.
It's where my brain always is. We're thinking about it.
All right, well, back to this. So Buck's main racket, though, was auto theft, and soon the boys were stealing cars all over Dallas. Clyde's first official arrest came at 17 after he failed to return a rental car and was caught running from police. Soon after, he was arrested for stealing a truckload of frozen turkeys, which I have to say is amazing.
What's with the birds?
That rocks.
I didn't even get that. You're right. He's stealing a bunch of flightless birds. That's so funny.
He's going to need a bird lawyer for all this bird theft.
Did you just make an Always Sunny reference?
That's
bird
right,
law?
I did.
My God, yeah.
Beautiful.
Good thing I practice bird law.
Beautiful. Oh, man. Where this episode's going to be like 3 hours long.
Sorry, I'm in a jokey mood today.
No, it's okay. That was a great one. So
Thank you much.
Buck took the fall and spent a week in jail, but by then Clyde had already built himself quite the reputation as a troublemaker. It wasn't long before Clyde met the woman with whom he would forge that bond that carried them both into the history books. Bonnie Elizabeth Parker was born in Rowena, Texas on October 1st, 1910. Bonnie's family was well better off than Clyde's. Her father was a bricklayer out of West Texas, seemingly on the road to create a stable life for his family. However, he died when his children were all very young. And that sort of sends the Parker family on a different path. Her mother then had to move to Dallas, and they became a part of an underclass of people there at the time. And this was sort of a group of people that were essentially underemployed, financially struggling, and undereducated. A step up from Clyde's family, but at that point they had fallen pretty close to it. Nevertheless, Bonnie was a bright student who excelled at school. She showed an interest in poetry and dreamed of one day becoming an actress. Her life turned a corner when she got involved with a classmate named Roy Thornton in her sophomore year of high school. And 6 days before her 16th birthday, she and Roy got married.
What?
Yep. It's crazy.
Damn.
But it was 100 years ago, too, so I guess 16's not that bad.
No, it was the way that, just one day after school, you know?
Yeah, just one day, 6 days before her 16th birthday, she runs out and gets married, yeah. But their marriage wasn't about settling down. Roy was a burglar, and he broke into safes. And he was frequently absent, and when he was around, he was physically abusive. So that marriage collapsed, and in 1929, Roy was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and the two would never see each other again. Because
Damn, what a way to get rid of your husband.
right? Well, mostly because at this time, Clyde, who was trying several jobs, kind of felt he had no way to make an honest living. And he would go visit a friend, and he would meet Bonnie.
Ah.
Exactly. Interestingly, though, Clyde, even before meeting her, Clyde had this problem because he was, like I said earlier, he developed this reputation for being something of a troublemaker. And the way the Dallas police worked at the time was that when a crime was committed, they had a list of people that they would just round up. Kind of like the whole usual suspect list, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they basically would eventually get to Clyde on this list, and they would bring him in for questioning. And their policy at the time, and this is crazy to me, they were allowed to bring people in for questioning and jail them for up to 72 hours without telling them why.
What?
That's pretty fucked.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
That's crazy. Then
You gotta at least tell him why. Like, that's really not much to ask.
Well, then there are documented cases where some of these people would be released after 72 hours and then rearrested for another 72 hours without charges.
That's nuts.
How the hell?
Fucking crazy. Can you imagine losing almost a week of your life just because someone committed a crime that you once got caught for?
Right?
Those-
And it's like, God forbid if they actually managed to, like, get a job, then
Right.
they lost it.
Yeah, and now they're right back in the situation where they were when they needed to do the crime.
And now they're gonna do even more crime.
Exactly.
Excellent work, police.
Yeah.
Once again, killing it.
Way to go, Dallas.
Loving it. Loving it.
In early 1930, 20-year-old Clyde's fate was sealed when he visited a friend and he met 19-year-old Bonnie, who at the time was making a cup of hot chocolate. Their friends would later say that it was love at first sight, that they were immediately inseparable, calling each other goofy pet names and all that shit. But their whirlwind romance was soon interrupted because in the following weeks, Clyde was caught for auto theft and sent to jail. So Bonnie, at this point, has a horrible track record. 2 for 2, right?
Yeah, for real.
This was Clyde's first time in prison, but it didn't last long. He convinced Bonnie to smuggle a gun into the prison for him while she was visiting.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So this is her first serious crime, but it fucking worked.
Damn, she's just mob wifing it. Let's rock.
Right. Well, I look back and my guess is these prison guards probably didn't believe a woman would do something like that at that time.
Probably.
Yeah. So Clyde was soon free to return to Bonnie, but as one would imagine, this was short-lived as he was recaptured a week later.
Mm-hmm.
This time, the judge had had enough of his bullshit and decided to make an example out of him. Instead of serving his time concurrently for the different crimes, the judge decided to sentence him to basically 14 years. He put him consecutively.
Oh.
He was taken to the Huntsville prison in Huntsville, Texas, and he was driven there on a transport that was known at the time as Uncle Bud's one-way bus, which I thought was too funny not to include.
That is funny.
That's a great name.
That's a great name for a prison bus.
It is.
So this town apparently had nothing going on in terms of entertainment, so crowds would gather as these buses rolled in. Clyde and his fellow prisoners were chained like livestock, and they had to climb out of this bus and shuffle through the town, basically being yelled at and taunted the entire way.
Woof.
Yeah. And I think it's obvious at this point that Clyde's not about to spend 14 years in prison.
Yeah, I don't think that would be good for he and Bonnie's relationship.
Right. There's no way this magically romanticized couple is going to have a 14-year break here at the beginning. So we all know where this is going. Yeah. But the medical staff at this prison decided that Clyde was fit and healthy, and therefore he was going to be sent to a prison farm. Life on prison farms was deliberately hard, and it was backbreaking.
Well, yeah,
work.
it's slave labor.
It is, yes.
It's legalized slave labor. That's all it is.
Right, and the place he was sent to was a cotton plantation that had literally been transformed into a labor camp. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, damn.
These places are notoriously brutal for the punishments they hand out, And I'm not going to go into all the details of these punishments because I know you guys can imagine how bad it was.
Mm-hmm. And that labor is still allowed and legal today and
Yes.
happens.
Yes, when I was in the military, there was a joke about Fort Leavenworth where they said you made big rocks into little rocks. That's what they used to say. Yeah. So Clyde was a small, good-looking guy in a brutal prison camp surrounded by some mean and merciless criminals. And just as with modern prisons, there are lifers in there who know they're never getting out, and they have zero reason to behave when they didn't need to. So
It makes sense.
So these types essentially ran the sleeping quarters, and one in particular, according to some of Clyde's fellow inmates, raped Clyde several times.
Oh, dear.
That's awful.
Yeah. I mean, it's no surprise, again, prison systems,
Yep.
Hate to say it, that's one of the things you should expect to have happen to you if you do something stupid and have to go to prison. But
yeah, and it's really fucking sad. Nobody deserves that.
I'm gonna disagree
Unless you
with
did it to somebody else.
I was gonna say murder and rape. Yeah, you deserve to have it happen to you. I'm sorry, but
I would honestly limit that to rape. But
I think murder. You don't think murder is as bad as rape?
okay, love having this conversation right now. Here's my thing.
Go ahead.
Obviously, murder is bad. However, there can be a reason to murder someone.
Agreed.
There is no ever any reason to rape someone.
Agreed. But
that's my thing. Maybe people go to prison for like someone was abusing my child, so I murdered them.
Right.
That is less bad than rape, in my opinion.
Agreed. But at the same time, you knew you were going to murder that person regardless of the reason. And therefore, I don't feel bad if someone rapes you in prison because you killed somebody, regardless of the reason.
Fair.
Because I've said it myself. If someone hurt my friend's children or my nieces and my nephews, I would kill that person. But knowing in the back of my mind that I'm probably going to take it when I get to prison. That's how that goes.
Fair enough.
So
hot topic of discussion on the podcast today.
I know, this is crazy. All right, let's keep going. So Clyde ultimately smuggled a pipe wrench in from somewhere, and with the help of a fellow prisoner, he managed to lure that guy away from guards, and he killed him. Clyde beat him with the pipe wrench as the accomplice stabbed the guy repeatedly.
Oh.
Yeah. So this guy got what he deserved, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So since that accomplice was already serving a life sentence, he confessed to the murder, sparing Clyde of any further issues.
Wow, that's a good guy.
In January,
he could have brought him down with him.
So in January of 1932, after 2 years at the farm, Clyde wanted out. So while he was out on work duty, he took an axe and he chopped off his own big toe.
Whoa!
In the hopes of either getting moved to a
fucking nuts.
in the hopes of either getting moved to a less severe prison or maybe a chance to escape. Unknown to him, his mother had already somehow successfully petitioned for his release.
Talk about shitty timing.
So 6 days after needlessly chopping off his own toe, Clyde limped his way out of prison.
Well,
right? That's
go
hilarious.
off.
That's hilarious. So
how do you explain that though?
At that point, everyone in your life knows what you do, so you'd probably just tell them, would be my guess. Or you say you dropped it, whatever,
Right, it was an accident.
So Clyde was free, but he wasn't the same person after getting out. As he took his first deep breath of fresh air as a free man, he made two promises to himself. First, that he would never set foot in prison ever again. And second, that he would take revenge on the system that tried to break him. So,
Damn.
Clyde's first move was to plan a breakout of that prison to free a friend that helped him while he was incarcerated. However, he needed to fund this plan, and he immediately returned to crime. And this time, Bonnie was going along as part of the gang. They're mostly famous for the bank robberies, But most of their robberies actually included small town stores and gas stations where they got little money. But once again, the couple's time together was brief, but this time it was Bonnie who was caught robbing a hardware store, and she was sent to jail.
Oh, damn.
Bonnie would spend her time inside writing poetry that would eventually be reprinted in newspapers, as we discussed.
Mm-hmm.
And these poems would kind of solidify her legacy. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Meanwhile, Clyde honed his skills behind the wheel. He wanted to be that getaway driver for robberies. And he was involved in one where a store owner was killed. And from that point forward, Clyde was a wanted man. Like at this point, everybody was looking for him.
Yeah, I bet.
Shortly after, he and 2 friends were drinking moonshine, which again, prohibition. The moonshine's everywhere.
That's the thing.
So they were drinking moonshine in a parking lot when they were approached by a sheriff and a deputy. Making good on his vow to never return to jail, Clyde opened fire without warning,
Oh my God.
killing one of them seriously and wounding the killing one of them and seriously wounding the other.
And jokingly killing the other one.
Yeah, yeah, very unseriously, yeah.
Very unseriously.
But actually, it makes me think of the line, "I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shoot the deputy."
Didn't shoot the deputy.
Yeah, that's what I thought of. So while it's not his first murder, because he did kill that guy in prison, this is the first time he had killed a law enforcement officer. So Bonnie was released from jail a few months later, and she met back up with Clyde and his now partner, a 16-year-old named William Daniel Jones, who was known as WD. WD was from the same area as the Barrows family and was basically just a kid who looked up to him. Now, an amusing side note, we're going to flash forward a little. Later, when all this comes to an end and WD is being questioned by police, he always claimed that he was asleep during the criminal events. Loud shootouts.
Oh my God.
Yeah, loud shootouts. He was asleep. Car chases. Don't remember anything. I was asleep. Literally.
Oh my God.
Yeah, literally, he's just like, I didn't see or hear anything. I was asleep. Fucking awesome.
That does rock.
At the end of 1932, the trio shot another sheriff's deputy and decided it was time to get out of Texas. For a couple of months, they traveled the Midwest in various stolen cars, which they would always abandon after they broke down, and then they would just hijack another car. So they were...
that makes sense.
They were not yet household names, so they basically moved about unhindered by organized law enforcement because this is pre-internet, pre-anything, really. Radio existed.
Right.
No one's really out looking for them except these different local town police. So they went about stealing cash from stores and gas stations when they needed it, and they rented rooms in various towns. Clyde drove while Bonnie navigated, and Jones was sort of like the group's gopher and photographer. He would snap photos of them in staged poses, similar to what you might see people taking, at fairgrounds at the time.
Oh my goodness. Me and my crime group need a photographer. So true, besties.
Right?
So
This is
true.
This is like early stage. This is like this is almost like the inspiration for Instagram, right?
They literally invented Instagram. That's crazy.
In almost every photo, they would lay out their vast array of weaponry and have it proudly displayed. Clyde was...
I'm assuming we have access to these photos.
Yes, we'll be posting them on our socials, absolutely.
Rockin'.
And Clyde was gun obsessed, and his favorite weapon was a Browning automatic rifle, which was a U.S. Army machine gun with more firepower than most normal police.
Ugh. And these were, I'm like, oh, this was available to civilians? It was probably stolen. Who am I kidding?
Literally my next line. Clyde had broken into multiple military armories and loaded the car with these.
Broke into the armory?
Yeah, I don't know how, because you'd think they'd be better guarded than that, but here we are.
You would think. That's wild.
They lived on the road, and they never drove slower than full fucking speed. Clyde would
love it.
Clyde would practice evasive maneuvers in these cars. Like he would fly, he would just be moving and then he would slam in reverse, or he would be moving really fast in reverse, slam on the brakes while shifting the car into second gear while it was spinning around and then taking off forward at full speed.
Dang, the career he could have had as like a stunt
A stunt
driver.
driver.
Something,
Yeah.
yeah. He was literally, everything he did, the local police didn't have a chance to stop him because they had never experienced anything like that.
Right. This guy was like got his PhD in crime.
Right? And the other important thing to note here is that police cars back then didn't have radios in them. So it's not like they could even call to another nearby car.
No radios?
Not in the cars. This is the 1930s. They weren't making radios small enough.
Oh,
Yeah.
fair point.
The transistor wouldn't be invented until the 60s or 70s, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure they had other things, maybe military grade stuff, but at this point, these local small towns in the Midwest couldn't communicate with each other.
Fair.
And another interesting thing that was true at the time is that these police were not allowed to cross state and or county lines.
Whoa.
Oh, that sucks.
So if
They were all just operating fully independent?
correct, so if I'm the police officer and I'm chasing you and you go from Texas to Oklahoma, I can't cross into Oklahoma. I can't do it and
Whoa.
arrest you. You probably never watched the TV show The Dukes of Hazzard, but that was one of the gags during that show is that the police would be chasing the Duke boys and they would cross into they would leave Hazard County and go into the neighboring county, and then they would just stop the car and stand there laughing at the police officer who had to stop and couldn't go after him. Yeah.
That's wild. But I
Yeah.
guess that like it does harken back to a time of like, yeah, states were individual and didn't think of themselves as like
Right, as a one big
the
federal
nation
Yeah.
nearly as much, and more of like, yeah, we are the United States.
No, I know they had to change those laws for that very reason.
Because it's like, you're really shooting yourself in the foot.
Right, exactly. And
And if you can't communicate,
Chopping your own big toe off, if you will.
oh my god, this is gonna be a great episode. All right, so in late March of 1933, Clyde rented an apartment above a garage in the city of Joplin, Missouri. The town was strategically positioned on a crossroad between 4 states, perfect for hopping across state lines to evade the police. The apartment itself offered a 360-degree view of the street and the surrounding areas. Clyde's brother Buck, who had just been released from prison, and together with his wife Blanche, reluctantly agreed to meet up with Bonnie, Clyde, and WD. Prior to this, Buck had been on the run as an escapee. He had run away from a prison farm, but somehow Blanche and his mother convinced him to turn himself in. He went back to prison and served his time.
Damn.
At this point, he believed that he could get Clyde to do the same thing.
Well,
not so much.
Yeah, not so
No.
much. No.
I don't think Clyde could if he turned himself in, I think he's in there for life
Yeah,
at this point.
I don't think they'd let him out ever again. Obviously, the attempts to talk Clyde into surrendering failed, and on April 13th, the gang was preparing to leave this apartment, with Buck and Blanche deciding to return to Texas to start their life over again. Bonnie and Clyde, with WD in tow, planned to find somewhere else to lay low while they continued to plot this prison raid that Clyde really wanted to do. However, they wouldn't slip away from Missouri unnoticed. The neighbors of this apartment building had become suspicious of the young strangers with out-of-state license plates, as nosy neighbors do. They reported their concerns to police, and that shootout that I talked about at the teaser at the beginning of this episode broke out. And they made their escape as a result of overwhelming firepower and their shoot-first attitude. They left 2 officers dead in their wake. But sadly, it wasn't a clean getaway. In their haste, Buck's marriage license and parole papers had been left behind.
Woof.
So Blanche's hopes of them going straight and living a quiet life was destroyed.
Yep, not happening now. That sucks.
More importantly, the police had Bonnie's notebooks and camera, When the photographs were developed, police were shocked. By morning,
Yeah, it's like all the evidence handed to you forever.
right? By morning, the sensational pictures of the Barrow gang, as they were known, were splashed all over the front pages. The photos showed an unmarried Bonnie and Clyde embracing and kissing. So scandalous.
Oh, the scandal.
Some of them showed W.D. Jones as he sat on the front end of their Ford V8 with guns racked up behind him. In every picture, the young gang were well dressed and armed to the teeth. But the image that captivated America was the one of Bonnie, all 4 feet 11 inches of her, in a black dress with a beret pushed back on her head. She had one foot resting on the bumper of the Ford, with her left hand hanging casually over the headlight, and in her right hand she was holding a revolver, and most shockingly, she had a cigar clamped in her mouth.
Not
I
a
feel like okay,
cigar.
that's like an iconic photo. I feel like I've definitely seen that.
You probably have, yes. And it's just funny to think that like that would shock people. Oh, the couple kissing and they're not married and she's got a cigar.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And not like guns.
Right? I mean, it is the U.S. I mean, come on. So police and news outlets intended to shock the public, but the pictures had the exact opposite effect. It romanticized them. Bank robberies, guns, fast cars, maybe a little bit of sexiness. It's not difficult to see why Bonnie and Clyde became folk anti-heroes.
Oh, 100%. Oh, I'm looking at this photo right now. It's so iconic.
Right? It's so great. So the people forgot that just a month before they had murdered people in cold blood. And similar to the Hatfields and the McCoys, and the mafia in many ways, people don't want to see that darker side of famous criminals. However, this new found fame made it impossible for them to keep a low profile. Motels became too hot for them to stay at, and the gang was forced to camp outside each night, sleeping under the stars, eating by dusty roadsides, and bathing in streams and rivers.
Yeah, the vibe they're used to, huh?
Nope. So it took its toll, and eventually Buck and Blanche left the group, promising to rendezvous with them in, like 3 months' time or a couple weeks, whatever it was. And on June 10th, 1933, just outside Wellington, North Texas, 6 members of the Cartwright and Pritchard family were just chilling on their front porch when they heard the roar of a car's engine as it raced towards a bridge near their home. The car had missed a detour sign, or maybe they didn't see the sign, and it turned towards a new bridge that was still under construction.
Oh.
At the last moment, the driver swerved and sent the car careening into a dry section of a riverbed where it spun and finally stopped. Because remember, Clyde always drove everywhere at top speed.
Right, of course.
So these people rushed forward to help. And when they got to the car, Clyde and WD were dragging themselves out, but Bonnie was slumped in the passenger seat. Alonzo Cartwright pulled her from the car and carried her back to the house, with the other men kind of staggering behind them. The family didn't recognize them, so they found a bed for Bonnie and discovered just how badly she was injured. Due to the acid from the vehicle's exploding battery being beneath her seat, she had suffered horrific burns to her right leg. In places, the damage was down to the bone and caused her muscles to contract.
Oh!
She needed urgent medical attention, but the farm had no electricity and no phone.
Oof.
So,
yeah.
Although the 3 criminals were reluctant, Alonzo convinced them to let him go to town and get a doctor. While he was gone, his wife Gladys tended to Bonnie, while Clyde and WD went back to the car to get their guns. As we've seen many times with groups of criminals, paranoia begins to settle in after a bit.
Mm-hmm.
They began to feel that Alonzo had been gone for too long, and Clyde began to suspect that he might betray them. WD panicked when Gladys tried to lock the door, so he fired a shotgun, blasting pellets through her hand.
Oh!
and narrowly missing a baby she was holding.
Holy
Oh my God.
Yeah. Then a car was heard approaching, and they looked out and saw that Alonzo had in fact alerted the police.
Oh no.
So they moved the family in the back, and WD and Clyde laid in wait. The two unsuspecting police officers were easily and quickly taken prisoner without anyone firing a single shot.
Oh.
They were handcuffed and put into their own car, and Clyde jumped behind the wheel. Bonnie screamed in pain as she was loaded in the back.
Oh.
3 hours later, they reached their rendezvous with Buck and Blanche. Strangely, Clyde was merciful, and he let both officers live as he tied them.
What?
He tied them to a cottonwood tree, and they left them there.
Wow.
Crazy. So with Buck and Blanche once again with them, the gang continued to rob in order to buy medical supplies to take care of Bonnie.
Without a professional?
Where are they going to go? They would get caught in no time.
I guess that's fair. Oh, but she's gonna die.
They were forced to hop between states to avoid the law, and during a botched robbery in Arkansas, they killed the town marshal. So again,
oh my God.
they're building up the number of places who really want them. In early July, the gang burgled the National Guard Armory in Enid, Oklahoma to restock their firepower. Again, I have no idea why these places are so easy to rob.
I know. It's like these old stories. It's like it's really easy to get away with literally everything.
Right. Back in the day. Because when I served in the military, you couldn't even get to our pistols without going through this crazy-ass thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, crazy to me.
Because of these guys. Are part of the reason, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because of people like this. So by the end of that month, the gang were all exhausted. They had been constantly on the move, living out of their car. Bonnie's leg wasn't healing properly, and they needed someplace to sit quietly and let her recuperate.
It was never going to heal properly. What the fuck?
To fund this, they went on a robbery spree in Fort Dodge, Iowa. They robbed
Is this Get the Hell Out of Dodge?
No, Dodge was the name of an actual town in like New Mexico or something, but that's really funny.
I was,
No, Dodge City was actually the name of a city in like New Mexico. That's where that phrase comes from.
Oh, interesting. Okay, is that from like a different story? Is that from a movie or something? Where is that from?
It's the old Wild West, so it's probably from like a Clint Eastwood movie or something. But yeah, that's way before this. It would have been 1800s.
Gotcha. Okay.
Oh, that's hilarious. So they robbed 3 gas stations in under 20 minutes before speeding to Kansas City, which was 250 miles away. That night...
That's a hell of a record.
Especially back then. But again, Clyde did nothing half-assed when he was driving. That night, they checked into the Red Crown Motel in Missouri. There were only 2 adjoining cabins, small rooms with garages in between, where they could stash the car. What the gang didn't know was that the restaurant across the street was a favorite hangout of highway patrol officers. So by the time they got to the Red Crown Motel, tensions were pretty high between the gang members after having to live in the woods and bathe in ravines. So they had been staying at the hotel, and Blanche was the only one who would go outside to the restaurant and buy food and drinks for everybody. And that started to arouse some suspicion, because people were like, who the hell's never coming out of this place that she keeps bringing food to?
I think nosy neighbors are like the hero of this story, which is kind of wild.
Right? Yeah, the Karens of the world.
Yeah, and we should put some respect on Karen's name for that reason.
Sure, I guess. I mean, you're right. They are doing the right thing. But it's funny because I forget that Bonnie and Clyde aren't the heroes of this story. And yet at the same time, you want them to get away. You know?
Yeah.
It's so
a compelling story is a compelling story, you know?
Right. And it's so crazy because I'm sitting there going, fucking assholes. But you're like, no, they're the heroes of this. And I'm like, you're right. They are.
Right. And it's like people these days aren't nearly as suspicious of everyone, I feel, in my opinion. You're right. You're right. And probably wouldn't have noticed this at all.
And your statement is made like we've covered enough cases of people not doing the right thing to prove your statement.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So the police ultimately got wind of this group staying there, and they brought a lot of firepower because at this point they're pretty sure they know who's in there. So late one night, an armored car rolled up outside the garage doors. At the same time, the sheriff and a group of officers approached carrying bulletproof riot shields.
Okay.
Now we're finally equipped for the task at hand.
But the Barrow gang saw them coming, and they unloaded a storm of gunfire on these officers. Now, I'm going to state up front, miraculously, no one was shot.
What?
Huh?
Yep.
What?
But the police were physically pushed back by the bullets hammering their riot shields.
Whoa.
I would hope so.
The military-grade, armor-piercing bullets from Clyde's favorite Browning machine gun blasted entirely through the armored car.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Now, somehow the horn of that got shot and blared relentlessly, adding further chaos to the scene.
God.
In the confusion, police fired tear gas, which landed in the restaurant parking lot instead of, in the middle of it all, obscuring everybody's view. Now, the police assumed that was a signal for a ceasefire, and they fell back.
What?
The driver of the armored car put it in reverse and moved away, unblocking the garage doors, and that allowed Clyde to drive the car out.
Insane. They're just like, yeah, go ahead, you guys.
Right? Now, as Blanche and Buck sprinted from the cabin, a bullet hit Buck, blowing off the front part of his skull.
Oh.
Miraculously, he survived and was dragged
What?
and was dragged into the car.
He survived. Damn.
Yeah.
Damn.
Now, there was only one exit. So Clyde accelerated towards the police and the oncoming gunfire. One of the windows shattered and hit Blanche in the face and eyes.
Ah!
Despite these injuries, though, once again the Barrow gang raced away into the night.
Woof.
Fucking crazy. They were aware at this point. They're aware that the noose is tightening, and their escape didn't buy them a lot of time. 4 days later, at 5 a.m. on July 24th, 1933, the Barrow gang were camping out at an abandoned amusement park near Dexter, Iowa. They were weary and injured, and they were eating around a campfire near the damaged car that they had just escaped in, and a new one that they had stolen.
Wow. Even in this rough-ass shape, they're like, yeah, I'm just going to grab a car real quick.
Well, they need it. Like, the other one's covered in bullet holes.
I know. It geeks me out how trivial it is to steal a car to these people.
Well, comparatively, yeah.
I know.
So despite the hour, Blanche was wearing sunglasses because fragments of glass were still lodged in her eyes.
Oh.
I hate it.
Bonnie's leg was getting worse because the wound had reopened and she could hardly walk.
Yeah, that shit's about to get gangrene.
Clyde and W.D. Jones had dug a grave for Buck, even though he was still alive and talking to everybody.
Oh, I don't know why I'm laughing at that, but that's crazy.
See, Buck was missing part of his skull, and Clyde had been pouring peroxide straight onto his exposed brain to keep it clean. Clyde,
I wish I'm dumbfounded. This doesn't sound medically possible. It's crazy.
Honestly, I have no idea. I'm guessing the bullet must have glanced his head and just sort of popped off a section of his skull the way an eggshell might crack off.
Yeah. Because the skull does have fault lines in it.
Right. Beyond that,
Wild.
I have no idea. So Clyde knew that the end was near for Buck when all of a sudden they were startled by a shout, and they realized that they were surrounded, and they were instructed to come out of the woods with their hands up. Unknown to the gang, the sheriff had raised a posse and to investigate the results of, reports that they had heard of a group of people sleeping outside in this area. They didn't want to take any chances, so the sheriff brought 50 heavily armed men to encircle their camp because they, like idiots, had a fire going.
Yeah.
So trapped, the gang reacted immediately, and as always, Clyde just opened fire. The posse responded in kind with shots coming in from all sides of their campsite. Clyde leapt to the nearest car and slammed it into gear. However, he took a bullet to the arm and he swerved and hit a tree.
Oh.
He then jumped out and began to run to the second car, but that one quickly became the target and was basically shot into scrap metal by an onslaught of bullets.
Wow.
Buck had been shot in the back, and Blanche refused to leave his side. Somehow, Clyde, WD, and Bonnie limped through the trees to a nearby river.
Insane.
Amazingly and foolishly, the posse believed that the gang were all dead because they stopped shooting back.
Oh, come on, really?
And they took a few moments to regroup before they entered the bushes, and that's what gave those three time to get away. Clyde could hear the shouts behind him as the sheriff found Blanche hiding with Buck. And despite having been shot several more times, Buck was still miraculously alive.
Buck is the sturdiest motherfucker I've ever heard of.
He's like the Terminator.
Literally.
So the capture of Buck and Blanche gave the others that distraction they needed to make their escape, and they ended up going to a farm and stealing a farmer's car.
Oh my God.
Bonnie was in constant pain, and Clyde had been shot in the arm. His brother Buck was held under armed guard at a nearby hospital, where he eventually did die of his injuries a few days later. Blanche was...
days later?
Yeah, days.
Impressive.
Yeah, he held on for a little bit. You're right, it's impressive. He's a strong fucker.
Yeah, for real.
Blanche was permanently blind in one eye and was soon behind bars herself.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, there was another round of photographs that were taken, and this helped make Blanche and Buck famous, because the famous photograph of them shows Blanche being arrested while Buck is on the ground being surrounded by officers. And I have to say, the first time I saw that photo, I thought it was fake, because she is standing there, like it's a wide angle shot. So like she's off to the left and he's on the ground to the right with a crowd of people surrounding him because he's obviously injured. And the way she's standing there being held made me kind of pause and was like, is this a real photo? But digging deep, that image kept coming up over and over and over again. So it's definitely a real image. It's funny that you're looking it up as we're going, but that's awesome that you're doing that.
I like to get it a little visual. It's fast. Oh yeah, this is crazy.
Yeah. And I'm going to mention this later, but Blanche is played by Sarah Hyland from Modern Family on a
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, on a Netflix 2-episode miniseries, and I highly recommend watching that because Sarah Hyland is one of my favorites. Oh my God, she's so good. W.D. Jones could see the writing on the wall, so once Bonnie and Clyde were healed up enough, he took off and went to his mother's house in Houston. Despite trying to keep a low profile, though, he was arrested that November. He went quietly and spun a story that he and Clyde had rehearsed many times. He claimed he never killed anybody or even held a gun. He said he was an unwilling partner, often tied up and or asleep. Gotta love
Again
this guy.
with the asleep thing.
Gotta love this guy. Jones.
Wait, so who he's saying did it? He's saying like his brother did it?
No, he's saying Buck died. This is W.D. Jones, the friend of Clyde's.
Oh, sorry, I got a little lost there.
It's okay. Yeah, so
I'm with us now.
He and Clyde had rehearsed this. So he basically said if he ever got caught, Clyde would take the fall. And he's trying to claim that he was, held against his will, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But he was sentenced to 15 years and paroled after 6 and then spent the rest of his life in Houston. Now, flash forwarding a little bit again. He lived long enough to see the 1967 film Bonnie and Clyde, but his response to it was ambivalent. He said, quote, "It made it look sort of glamorous, But like I told these teenage boys sitting near me at the drive-in, take it from an old man who was there, it was hell, unquote.
Oh, just imagine. That's crazy.
If I were those boys, I'd be like, yeah, bullshit, guy.
Literally, 100% I'd say bullshit.
Yeah, you were there. Okay, yeah. So, as 1933 drew to a close, Bonnie and Clyde were still wounded and on the run. Conscious that their time was basically running out, they turned again to Clyde's ambition of raiding that prison and breaking out his friends.
Oh my God.
It's weird that he even kept up with that.
You know what? You don't let your dreams be dreams.
Yeah, never give up on your dreams. So on January 16th, 1934, he made his dream come true. At an appointed time, Bonnie and Clyde were sitting in the fog in their cart, and the prisoners made their escape. They shot and killed a guard and ran for the car, and Clyde just started shooting. And Bonnie, who was in the vehicle and a little bit further away, started beeping the horn. And they basically created all this noise to kind of distract the guards and whatever, and 4 prisoners managed to get to the car with Clyde. Now,
Wow.
some of these escapees weren't part of the plan. They had just saw what was happening and decided to just go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And Clyde allowed them to join them to get away because he basically said, anyone who gets to the car is coming with me, fuck the system kind of thing.
Yes.
So this prison break was the tipping point for the governor of Texas, and he decided to bring in someone to take them down. And this person was Texas Ranger Frank Hammer. Hammer was famous as a manhunter with dubious morals and a reputation for bringing down his quarry by any means necessary.
So he's like bounty hunter.
Yeah, he's a badass. He was essentially brought in because Clyde and his gang had shot so many police officers and had gotten away with it so many times that the governor was like, fuck this, take him down.
Right. Like, we can't replace these police officers anymore.
Right? Like we can't even hire new people.
Right.
To be honest,
no one will take the job.
I wouldn't take the job with those 2 running around.
No.
Fuck that. So from February of 1934 onward, Hammer lived out of his car as he was constantly the duo's shadow, often only a day or so behind them. Bonnie and Clyde were using one of the other prisoners that they had sprung from the prison as their new gopher, and his name was Henry.
Yep.
His name was Henry Methvin. Yeah, so they replaced WD with Henry here.
Well, thanks, Henry.
Right? So Methvin helped them steal cars and the money they needed to stay one step ahead of Hammer. On Easter Sunday, outside Grapevine, Texas, the gang's car attracted the attention of 2 highway patrol officers. They gunned them both down in cold blood.
Whoa.
Now, an eyewitness said they saw Bonnie fire the fatal shots that killed the police officers. Exaggerated rumors claim that Bonnie laughed as the officer's head bounced like a rubber ball as she shot him.
Holy crap.
Whoa.
Now, these stories were later discredited, but not before they were printed in the newspapers. And some
Oh, yeah. So they're like, these people are fucking crazy and evil.
Right, and some people claim the police did that on purpose to lower the couple's popularity.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I believe it.
So whether true or not, the wanted posters began to offer rewards for both Bonnie and Clyde dead, not alive.
Oh.
So never far behind them, Frank Hammer mapped out the outlaws' routes, and he realized that they were consistent, always skirting the borders of states ready to hop over where police couldn't pursue them.
Mm-hmm.
Around this time, the gang had been visiting Methvin's family home in northern Louisiana.
That's probably not a good idea, huh?
Well, Hammer, yeah, right, you'd think so, right? Hammer discovered that the Methvins had suddenly come into money and bought a new farm. Now, it's never been proven that Clyde bought this farm for them, but it's obviously suspected.
We can guess.
Yeah, because that farm's location was the perfect hideout. It was nestled in the backwoods, not far from the Texas and Arkansas borders. So Hamner was closing in, and he gathered a posse of 4 colleagues from Texas, including a deputy that could identify Bonnie on sight. He also recruited 2 local lawmen to ensure that he had jurisdiction in Louisiana. He knew that a raid on the farm was risky, that the gang would be on their home turf with their own firepower, and that they would have the upper hand. So he knew he needed to take them by surprise. And he had no doubt that Bonnie and Clyde were going to go down together.
Mm-hmm.
Hamner started to think that Henry Methvin might be their weak link. Now, Henry's father, Ivy, who worried that his son would be caught in a crossfire and killed, agreed to help Hammer in return for his son's pardon, which is smart on his part. Yeah, that's really smart.
It is smart, but also, like, can a manhunter grant a pardon? I don't know. We'll see.
Well, yeah, that's not how the law works today, but who knows how it worked back then.
Fair enough.
Henry had gone out with Bonnie and Clyde one morning to get sandwiches at a cafe. And while there, Henry just sort of disappeared. He snuck out the back. Now, Bonnie and Clyde weren't too suspicious of this because, they were on the run. And they knew that if Henry looked up and saw a cop looking at him for too long, he might have gotten spooked. And like most criminals, they had a fallback plan if they ever did get separated, and they had a rendezvous point. So now it's 9 a.m. on Wednesday, May 23rd, 1934. Hidden in dense bushes along the roadside on Highway 154 was Frank Hammer and his 5 chosen men. The previous day, Hammer was told that Henry Methvin had left Bonnie and Clyde. So he knew at that point that the couple would travel along this road to rendezvous at the Methvin farm just a couple miles away from where they were hiding. So the men had studied the couple's previous encounters with law enforcement, and they had come prepared. Every one of them had high-powered rifles or Browning automatic machine guns like Clyde had.
Mm-hmm.
Hammer had selected this location perfectly. Positioned on a rise in the road, he had a good view in both directions, but Hammer knew that Clyde would be driving at full speed as he always did.
Mm-hmm.
So to secure the pardon for his son, Ivy Methvin had been forced to play an active role in what was to come next. On the opposite side of the road sat Ivy's truck, jacked up with one wheel removed. Hammer assumed that Clyde would recognize it and that he would stop to help. At 9:15, Hammer heard the sound he had been waiting for, the distinctive noise of a Ford V8 being driven at high speed. His men readied their rifles. Suddenly, the tan Ford careened around a corner in a cloud of dust, and when Clyde saw Ivy's truck, he hit the brakes and slowed to a crawl.
Oh, okay.
As he approached, a single gunshot rang out. Bonnie screamed as Clyde slumped backwards.
Oh, God.
And then the other 5 men in the trees opened fire. A deadly rain of bullets tore into the car and punched holes clean through the frame. After several seconds, Bonnie's screams had stopped, but the barrage did not. Thunderous gunfire could be heard for miles, and the devastated Ford began to slowly roll towards the side of the road, and the gunshots continued to follow it.
Oh,
Still? Holy crap.
Hammer and his men had no intention of letting anyone inside that car survive.
sounds like they did a good job turning the Swiss cheese.
Finally, as the car rolled to a stop, everything fell silent. Frank Hammer walked from the bushes with his gun in his hand. There was no movement and no sounds from the car, so he reached in and turned the engine off. Bonnie was dead, still clutching the sandwich she had been eating when the car rounded the corner. She was
Oh my God.
She was just 23 years old.
Ooh.
Whoa.
Clyde was next to her, slouched in his seat, also dead at 24 years old.
Whoa. You know what? I haven't been keeping track of the years. That's crazy.
Yeah, they weren't at it for very long, a couple years at most.
But they were doing it hard.
It was estimated later that the 6 men fired over 150 rounds into the car and its occupants, though it's widely believed that the first shot killed Clyde outright. The pair didn't get a chance to fire a single shot in return. And the sad and crazy part is while police collected evidence, their bodies were just left sitting in the car.
What?
While they searched the car,
Evidence.
Police found 15 sets of license plates, as well as an as well as an armory of pistols, rifles, shotguns, and of course, Clyde's favorite, the Browning automatic. 2 men were left on guard while the others went into town to get a tow truck. While the others were gone, including Hammer, a crowd quickly gathered, and when Hammer returned, it was fucking chaos. People were hacking at the trees with knives, trying to pry bullets from the bark, and they were removing grisly souvenirs from the car and Clyde and Bonnie's bodies.
Off their bodies? Holy crap.
Oh, people are crazy.
The crowd were taking bullets, scraps of metal, pieces of clothing, and even locks of Bonnie's hair.
Do you think the crime scene is kind of tainted?
Not that it's going to matter at this point. One man had to be stopped from trying to cut off Clyde's trigger finger.
Holy hell. That's a little creepy.
Can you imagine? What the fuck?
That just like shows the depravity of even everyday people in crazy circumstances.
That's true.
What would he do with it? Keep it?
I would assume so. Yeah, it would end up in a museum somewhere, I would think. By the time the car, which was still carrying Bonnie and Clyde's bodies, reached the nearby town of Arcadia, nearly 16,000 people were filling the streets.
Whoa!
Holy shit.
They surged to take pictures and rip grim mementos from the vehicle. Bonnie and Clyde were finally taken in for an autopsy, and reports showed 17 entrance wounds through Clyde's body, but a further 23 on Bonnie. It's crazy that she got hit more than he did.
I was going to say, that's insane.
My guess is maybe because she was still alive, like if the first shot took him in the head and killed him instantly, he was no longer moving, and maybe she was still trying to move around while she was getting shot.
Could be. And I don't know, with that rain of bullets, I would call that just like up to error.
Right, that's true too.
I wouldn't call that statistically significant difference.
You're right, it's only 6 shots. You're right. The next day, their families arrived to take the bodies back to Texas. Clyde Barrow's body was presented in a mansion in downtown Dallas with nearly 15,000 people in attendance. He was buried next... Yeah, that's a lot of people. Yeah. He was buried next to his brother Buck. Bonnie's sister attended Clyde's funeral, but the rest of her family did not. At 2 p.m. the next day, Bonnie's service was held, and even though she made it clear she wanted to be laid to rest alongside Clyde, her mother would not allow it.
Damn.
She said, quote, "He had her in life, but he wouldn't have her in death," unquote. Bonnie Parker was...
Wow.
It's crazy. I mean, normally, I think legally you have to go with their last wishes if it's in writing, and I'm going to guess Bonnie probably didn't have it in writing. But in this instance, you can't hold it against her mother, right?
No.
So Bonnie Parker was buried in Dallas's Fish Trap Cemetery. And yes, that is the actual name.
Weird.
I had to look that up. I was like, really? Like that's not a mistype? Her family had trouble working their way through the crowd at her service, which had over 20,000 people there.
What the fuck?
They were famous.
Yeah.
Tributes poured in. The largest was from a group of Dallas newsboys in gratitude of Bonnie and Clyde for helping them sell so many newspapers.
You know what? That's fair.
In 1945, Bonnie's grave had to be moved to Crown Hill Memorial Park due to persistent vandalism, and that's where she still rests today, which is still 9 miles from Clyde. In the years following their death, the blood-spattered and bullet-torn Ford V8, known as the Death Car, was displayed at public fairs until people's interest finally waned.
Wow.
Despite their notoriety while on the run, their brief crime spree was almost forgotten by the year 1967 when a biopic was released starring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. This film broke from cinematic taboos at the time with its depiction of sex and violence and told a more glamorized, fictionalized account of this crime spree. Now, the screening was held at the height of the Vietnam War, so anti-authority themes kind of stirred up the public imagination.
Oh, I bet.
This film was a hit. It won 2 Oscars and a BAFTA.
Holy crap.
Today, the bullet-riddled Ford V8 death car sits in a casino in Nevada, along with the tattered shirt that Clyde was wearing when he was killed. Some of the guns that were recovered by Hammer are displayed at the Bonnie and Clyde Ambush Museum in Gippsland, Louisiana, which was the town where they were shot. And the museum occupies the very building where the couple bought their last sandwiches on that fateful morning.
Wow.
It's just crazy. There's another museum in Joplin, Missouri that holds several of Bonnie's necklaces and the door that was punctuated with bullet holes from that critical shootout in the apartment there that I used as the teaser at the start of this episode.
Wow.
Yeah, and as I've already mentioned, in 2013, there was a 2-episode miniseries on Netflix that starred Emile Hirsch and Halliday Grainer as the couple. And, of course, Sarah Hyland plays Blanche. And I highly recommend anyone watch that. It's my absolute favorite. And that is the case of Bonnie and Clyde.
Damn. What the
Wow.
hell of a story.
It's crazy.
Holy
I
crap.
love that story. It's got everything.
Yeah, they were towards the end. I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm rooting for you anymore, but
That's true.
they had me for a second there.
Yeah, at the end it got a little crazy, especially when they couldn't get medical help and they basically tormented that one family that tried to help them. But
Yeah, that's a little fucked.
But yeah, like it's such a great story. And again, I highly recommend anyone watch that miniseries. It's like a 2-episode thing on Netflix. It's so good. Again.
Oh, I'm gonna check it out for
yeah,
sure.
So good. But yeah, so thank you everybody for joining us once again. I am Janus Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.